Within technical SEO, like what are one or two of those like high leverage activities you find yourself doing for clients?
Something that I used to do more, and it's kind of like a process or deliverable that's no longer in my hands as much. But internal linking has been, I would say, just a wonderful way to kind of move the needle on pages that are underlinked internally in a website, and just adding a few very strategic links can really kind of turn the corner. I guess started doing that years ago, working with a few different like larger programmatic sites, and was just amazed at the kind of numbers that just a little bit of that activity would do. That's a very manual process. I would say other than that, I think just high leverage stuff is like, what is something that affects the entire website? And so I've encountered sites before where it's like it's all a single page JavaScript app, and the founder is wondering why he's having trouble getting pages indexed. And so it's like, let's turn on, prerender.io or some other SSR server-side rendering setup, and start serving some HTML, and the Search Console graph goes brr because you're finally serving HTML.
Hi, and welcome to the Optimize podcast. My name is Nate Matherson, and I am your host. On this weekly podcast, we sit down with some of the smartest minds in content marketing and SEO. Our goal is to give you perspective and insights on what's moving the needle in organic search. Today, I'm thrilled to sit down with Matthew Kay. Matthew works in agency SEO, where he often specializes in technical SEO and reporting. On this week's episode, Matt and I chat about technical SEO, algorithm updates, SEO for B2B companies, and so much more. And this episode of the Optimize podcast is brought to you by Positional. If you don't know by now, my name is Nate, and I'm one of the co-founders of Positional, and we just launched our toolset publicly in late March. That means that you can go to positional.com and sign up for our toolset and play around. We've got a trial. We'd love for you to check out our tools for keyword research, internal linking, content optimization, and we've even got a couple tool sets for analytics as well. And you can check it out at positional.com. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the Optimize podcast.
Absolute pleasure to be here, Nate. Thank you.
So the first question I ask all of our guests is, how did you get into the world of content marketing and SEO?
So for me, it all started with a Danish plastic Lego brick. I was a fan of Lego, and I sort of had that unfortunate/fortunate way of turning what was a hobby into a career of sorts. So I started a media company about Lego with a friend of mine at the time, and it was called Beyond the Brick. So we originally were an audio-only podcast recording on Skype. This was many, many years ago. That turned into a YouTube channel. YouTube channel turned into social media properties. Social media properties turned into a website. And so in the process of learning to create content, get distribution, negotiate brand deals, figure out monetization channels for this, kind of nascent, very niche hobby media brand, I taught myself how to run ads, how to arbitrage different display ad networks, negotiate brand deals, optimize for YouTube SEO and the YouTube ad algorithm, build websites in WordPress. And then friends of mine basically got wind of the fact that I could build a website in WordPress, or I could maybe help them, figure out how to get traffic from the internet, fun stuff like that. And I looked up a few years later, and I was helping a lot of people. And then people suggested you should, charge people for this. And it's called consulting. It's pretty fun. And I never really looked back. And I actually was having so much fun doing that, I stepped away from the YouTube channel and the Lego world, as it were, to focus on SEO and to focus on digital marketing.
So we're going off script already, Matthew. I have to ask, why is agency SEO or consulting more fun, in your words, than building your own site?
So I like Lego because I like to build, and I like to kind of create. That's like the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. It's like, what are we going to build today? What are we going to work on? What are we going to learn? like what new things are we going to do? We are on a podcast right now, and I am talking to you publicly, but like being in front of a camera and like becoming a on-camera personality, that like didn't really seem quite so appealing. So that was one of my thinkings. And then I think I've talked with friends of mine over the years. If you like view things as games, you're either playing an infinite game or you realize that there are certain like blockers to furthering the game that you are. So like with Lego, you're a Lego media brand. You have the Lego company. You have nothing else. To no one else to go to monetize to. It's a very small ecosystem. And so I was like, I just don't want to play in that small of a sandbox for my entire life. I need to cut it while it's, while I'm still having fun. And I pulled the ripcord.
So you've been doing SEO for a number of years now. How has SEO changed since you first started doing SEO?
I view the opportunities for, excessive arbitrage. Like, I guess, what does that mean? It's like, doing spammy things and getting traffic from doing the spammy thing. That those like stories and those opportunities have kind of diminished over time. And I think that is the one through line. If I think about like, what was I really concerned about or thinking about in like 2014 or 2015, that stuff is not real anymore. I am no longer running a server in the Netherlands with a bunch of like PBN link building software on. Like, no, it's not going to move the needle in 2024.
Yeah, I did. And it sounds like I got started in SEO around the same time you did. And I like to say that like SEO has gotten a lot simpler over the years. Like a lot of those hacks and tricks and things that we obsessed about are not necessarily important these days.
I like to break it down into like almost like the two modalities, or that's sort of how I like bifurcate. You have your arbitrage, and then you have just like the fundamentals. And then if you view like SEOs, where you want to put people into boxes, there are a lot of people that they love to arbitrage, and like they're always looking for a little, to go find a little traffic hole somewhere and take advantage of that. And then there's other people, maybe they're more focused on the fundamentals of like creating, beautiful content that people want to read, building web experiences that people want to spend time in. I think there's overlaps between the two, but they're perhaps not, that they are kind of their own worlds.
What in SEO hasn't changed since you first started doing SEO?
It's the fundamentals, at the core of it, Google was created. And all other search engines to bring content to people or to bring end consumer journeys and help them terminate and find a destination. And so the fundamentals are still real. Are you serving content or an experience or a product or something else that someone needs or wants? And if the answer is yes, you deserve to get traffic. Why aren't you? And those fundamentals will never go away. If you have a real brand, you have a real business, and you're really adding value, you deserve to have a place in the world.
So I'm sure you've seen it because I know you're on Twitter, X, whatever we call it these days, like I am. And it seems like more people are complaining about SEO than they ever have, at least from my view. What would you say to all those people that are complaining lately?
I mean, typically, aren't they trying to sell like a $499 niche site course or something?
Something like that. Yeah, often.
I find the most silent people are probably doing some of the most interesting stuff, which is interesting in of itself. That dynamic is pretty real. I'm not that interesting, and I am pretty silent. So that I'm in that corner of the matrix. But I think there are people that they stand to gain quite a lot from ruffling feathers or beating a drum, and so I have respect for that. They're trying to do what they need to do, but I think a lot of SEOs that I spend most of my time speaking with, I would say, just tend to share the cool stuff that they're working on. They share stuff they're learning, and the like. Google is evil, awful, that like mentality is not necessarily espoused by them per se.
So it sounds like you're not going to be joining a class action lawsuit against Google for taking away all of your traffic. I saw that on Twitter and I was like, come on, guys. We're like building on top of Google. Like Google is the platform. Like they don't owe us anything at the end of the day.
Nobody owes anyone anything ever is like a core belief of mine. Like nobody owes me anything. I don't owe anybody else anything. I love my family, obviously, brother, sister, mother, father. But I think like, I would be more interested in like training, someone in Eastern Europe to like create incredible TikTok videos and start getting traffic there than spending energy on joining a class action Google lawsuit. So sorry. Yeah.
Well, what do you make? Like, and then I don't want to spend this entire episode talking about algorithm updates, but do you have any like quick thoughts on like the March core update or the spam updates or any of the other algorithm updates that have happened in the last 6 months?
I don't like follow every 5 minute, interval update of like visibility tracking by different cohort or different. I'm not like that completely married to every change in every algorithm update, but I think the fundamentals, and I think this one showed more of that. There are some edge cases, granted, like, people that maybe did not deserve to lose traffic, losing traffic, which always happens too. That's kind of how it all goes. But people that are serving a fundamentally valuable piece of content or a valuable experience, product, whatever, they are left unaffected, and they continue to win and they continue to get traffic and they continue to have a business or a brand. And the people that are arbitraging or are adding maybe some incremental value, but it's not like a real business or a real brand. I'm probably not the person that should be telling what's real and what's not, but that's kind of the trend, right?
Yeah, and I've seen some interesting analysis on Twitter from a few different accounts. So I don't want to pick anyone in particular, saying that like with these core algorithm updates, it's clear that like companies that offer product and services have tended to like perform a lot better through the algorithm updates versus like pure content sites or like niche sites or affiliate sites. And there's probably a lot of correlations there, like real companies with products and services maybe pay more attention to the quality of their content. I'm not sure. But like, do you think that like Google is intentionally trying to prioritize companies with real products and services and maybe not prioritize like an affiliate site?
I think that everything points to those signals being real, right? If you are just a content site and you're clearly just a content site, that's like, what are you really doing other than just collecting your Amazon affiliate payments? Why do you deserve to rank? I think, yeah, I don't know.
So I know in your role, you're a technical SEO lead at Growth Plays, and I have to ask, what does a technical SEO lead do in your role?
Yeah, so last few years I've been doing some work with John Henry out in LA, Growth Plays, and we work with all B2B SaaS and all B2B SaaS companies. My charge de force, or whatever that French phrase is to lead and to create offerings surrounding auditing customer websites, monitoring them for technical health on an ongoing basis, and then reporting on them in intelligent and insightful ways. And so if anyone has read Bernard from ClearScope, his recent post about, he was calling it ranch style SEO, he kind of threw a little one-liner in there that I think is pretty interesting, but it's essentially, to a certain extent, a lot of content management systems these days kind of obfuscate away a lot of the baseline technical SEO stuff that used to be important and used to be something that would take time to get right. So with that in mind, it once again goes back to the fundamentals of technical SEO. They become more important, which is, in my opinion, crawl, index, render. So can you crawl the web page? Is it indexable? And then can a search engine render it? And if all of those things are true, you're good. And so I think in my role, all of these B2B SaaS companies, a lot of them are on very, cut and dry WordPress, Webflow, contentful kind of CMS setups. And lots of, most everything is taken care of out of the box. And there's always a few edge cases. And so with that in mind, what I try to deliver is just a very prioritized and very cut and dry kind of checklist, Jira ticket style. Fix these things, and this will probably incrementally move the needle in the right direction. But I think you probably have seen agencies that just hit export on the Ahrefs site auditor or SEMrush auditor tool, and then deliver a 95-slide PowerPoint or something. And then, of course, no executive can prioritize internally for why should we devote developer resources to making some score go burr, and then nothing ever gets done. And that's kind of a dark side of ineffective technical SEO, shall we say.
Yeah, one of our customers actually did pay like $299 or $299 a month, I should say, for like a technical SEO audit. And they shared the PDF with me, and it was an export from like one of those tools that you mentioned, and it was about 95 pages long. And I tried to make my way through it, and like I do think there were some valuable insights in there, like for example, a page not having an H1 or duplicate title tags across like 30 pages. I do think that stuff is worth addressing, but a lot of it I kind of thought was like not that impactful or not that important or not something that I would necessarily be that concerned with. And I guess I have a love-hate relationship with technical SEO, not because it doesn't matter, but I've found that like agencies often burn a lot of time on technical SEO projects that really just like won't move the needle. So I have to ask you, like within technical SEO, like what are one or two of those like high leverage activities you find yourself doing for clients?
So something that I used to do more, and it's kind of like a process or deliverable that's no longer in my hands as much, but internal linking has been, I would say, just a wonderful way to kind of move the needle on pages that are underlinked internally in a website, and just adding a few very strategic links can really kind of turn the corner. I guess started doing that years ago. Working with a few different like larger programmatic sites, and was just amazed at the kind of numbers that just a little bit of that activity would do. That's a very manual process. I would say other than that, I think just high leverage stuff is like, what is something that affects the entire website? And so I've encountered sites before where it's like it's all a single page JavaScript app, and the founder is wondering why he's having trouble getting pages indexed. And so it's like, let's turn on, prerender.io or some other SSR server-side rendering setup, and start serving some HTML, and the Search Console graph goes brr because you're finally serving HTML. So I always look for stuff like that. If it's like, what is the one thing that affects the entire site? Like, is there a canonical misconfiguration, some sort of misconfiguration in like the like primary canonical router for the website logic that needs to get improved? That sort of stuff. It's the Pareto, it's the 80-20.
And you mentioned internal linking, and you mentioned that like you found that reworking some internal links pretty strategically for your clients often leads to a pretty big impact. How long does it usually take to see like a manipulation of internal links actually yield like a positive result for a site? Like how long is that learning process for Google?
Give you the most SEO answer of all time. It depends.
No.
Yeah, no, don't do that. It can be, I would say, relatively quick, but as with everything, it kind of, as Google recrawled those pages, and over time, 1, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in that time range, then you start to see that uplift kind of occurring, and then as actual users maybe are clicking between pages and sending signals. Whatever they do, I think that it all sorts to become evident.
Well, now I have to ask a really controversial SEO question. Like, how important are those signals? Google has said very, very contradictory things here. That, like, on one hand, like Google has said in released PowerPoint presentations that they do look at signals to determine like how people, in their words, react positively or negatively to documents. But then other SEOs will say that like on-page signals are total BS and don't matter. In your opinion, how important are on-page signals or on-page behavior for Google?
I just like to take it back to fundamentals. I think that's the way to roll. If you are trying to figure out, is my dog gonna die because he ate my cactus? Do you want to pull up a blog post that does not have an attributed author, has a header image that fills your entire desktop screen, does not give cited sources for like where this information is coming from, is just a blob of text at the top, or paragraphs and paragraphs of like font size 12 formatted. Like you're just it's an awful user experience. Like I don't want to read it, and I'm going to bounce. And why does that content? It's not a great piece of content for the web. Sorry. So I think the fundamentals matter. So you probably see all the SEO optimized blog template, LinkedIn, social, whatever blog posts, and the fundamentals are pretty solid. The author, that's a person, template that has a table of contents, has a header section that maybe doesn't have a screen filling image and has like those bite-sized kind of bullet point summary text at the top, all of that stuff. And all of those signals, I'm sure, move the needle in a positive direction.
Yeah, don't get me started on featured images that take up like 20% of the scroll. I hate those. Speaking of internal links, how important is anchor text on those internal links? Is that something you pay a lot of attention to?
I think if you're over optimizing or you're grotesquely under optimizing, either or are not, you want to look for that Goldilocks zone. But once again, it is like that should be the focus of all SEO effort is internal anchor text optimization. No, I don't. I think I view it once again in like that kind of Pareto 80-20. If there's a grotesque misalignment or lack thereof or hyper optimization thereof, there's probably something to do. But other than that, let it rock. And if you think about anchor text as like a good footnote for, good anchor text is good for web accessibility, and good web accessibility is good for SEO. And those circles are so overlapping. It's incredible.
Sounds like what you're saying is we just need to do what's best for the user.
I sound like a shill for Google or some other larger entity when I say things like that. But yes, keep your user in mind, make them very happy, and you will be rewarded with untold riches, young fellow. Early on in my career, I was fully independent consultant, just working with small businesses, kind of, doing this, doing that. I hadn't really decided to niche into SEO at that time. One of my favorite clients early on, it was an industrial oil water separation business. And the founder had been, I guess, running this business for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And sometime in the early 90s, decided to buy a domain name for this thing called the internet. And he had just gone and written the most authoritative, informative, incredible content about the minutia of oil water separation in like with no direction really. I would always ask him like, who told you to do this? I'll just put together a website that has a page for everything about this thing that I have been focused on for my entire life. And he would ship oil water skimmers to all sorts of customers all over the world because of his website. And he just dominated for all of those terms. And it was like a good early crash course for me of like, it's the fundamentals. Like he knows that there's a guy in Kansas with construction boots on that like has $100,000 budget and needs to get a bunch of oil out of a pond at a power plant. And if he can help him, that the content on his website is like, oh, this is my guy, and calls him up, boom, done, sold.
Well, it sounds like now you're saying we just need to create helpful content.
Helpful content with the user in mind.
We're about halfway through this episode of the Optimized podcast, and I just want to give a special shout out to our sponsor. You might have guessed, Positional.com. Check out their awesome set of tools for content marketers and SEOs. And now back to the podcast. So simple. No, I'm having fun with this, but I also totally agree with you that people make SEO way too complicated, especially like early stage startups. Like I always tell them, like, just if you just do one thing right, create helpful content, and then you can kind of figure it out from there. Or like really great content. But most of the time, like startups will pick like all of the right keywords and then actually create like a bunch of really crappy, unhelpful content, and they want to know why it doesn't rank, and also too, then they want to know why it's not like converting customers. And I say to them like, yeah, quality of content matters for SEO, but it also matters to actually get that person who's visited your page to want to work with you. And it sounds like this client like delivered that experience for searchers, and it sounds like they actually wanted to work with him as a result. Um, yeah, what is, on the content creation side of things, I know we're going to talk mostly about technical SEO, but on the content creation side of things, like what's like a big mistake like you'd see like a B2B SaaS company make on the content creation side of things?
Yeah, think about the example I just referenced, right? So that was the founder of that business. He was putting his name everywhere, and he knew about it because he'd been doing it for 30 years. And he was probably saying stuff that, I mean, I would do, competitive research for him and pull up different, like, he was to the moon, like, in terms of, like, I mean, there's this, like, all this talk about this concept of information gain recently. And it's like his entire site was in all information gain. It was like unregurgitated stuff that he had just gotten from phone conversations and running a business for 30 years. And so, like, for, people I work with and, customers that I've worked with, I think the world where you could pay someone 10 cents a word to put together a 500-word boilerplate blog post that rehashed, existing concepts, and just because it was on your domain with some sort of weird optimized, header structure that you were going to get traffic, like, that world is gone. And I think the people that are doing the best content, the best work right now, it's people that have that expertise. They're in the industry. They're in the sauce. They're in the day to day. They know the minutia. They know what people want to read. They know what's interesting. They have a unique take on it. All of that stuff is working. And when all of that is at play, you know, things work. It's great.
I want to pretend for a second that I was like a customer of yours, like a new customer. We've just started working together, and on my website, I've got, let's say, 100 of those like 10-cent per word, 500-word blog posts. Would you delete them? Would you remove them from the site?
Think about how much credibility you lose if you have that on your site. Like, I wanted to work with you, and then I went and read a bunch of like 500-word articles that, like, didn't really make any sense and maybe were even wrong or like incoherent. That's awful. Like, and I think if you're operating, I've heard stories through the grapevine of, like, people putting up AI generated content in, like, the financial, like, regulated spaces, right? Like financial, tax stuff, where the AI had created something that's objectively wrong, just like illegal or like bad. And, like, that's awful. That's like, delete it. Yeah. Get rid of it yesterday.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people forget about with AI generated content, is that it is often fairly wrong.
You also have, like, sunk cost fallacy with something like that, right? Where it's like you think that you have these 80 blog posts and you maybe took some resources to create them, and you don't want to get rid of them because you don't want to lose them. But if you look at the numbers and you look at, are they converting anything? Is there anything going on there? Probably not. Um, and they're awful, then yeah, get rid of it.
Yeah, I was talking to a startup a couple months back, and they had like 100,000 content pages. And I said to them, I'm like, of these 100,000 content pages, like how many of them have you actually converted a customer from in the last year? And like it was a small, like single digit fraction of the hundreds of thousands of pages. And I said 100,000 pages, I should say. And I said to them, like, well, if you're not converting customers from this content and it's not that high quality, like why does it need to exist on your website? And they said to me like, oh, look, it's like we put in hundreds of thousands of dollars in actually creating this content. And so I definitely agree with you. There can be that sunk cost feeling that you don't want to get rid of it because you already spent the money.
Yeah, I think that it used to be called database SEO, and now they call it programmatic SEO. But like the dark side of that is if you just get people that are like downloading EPA.gov data sets or whatever public data, and then just spinning together 200,000 pages for no reason, and then trying to get them indexed. It's I don't know. That's just I think that there's like a missing architectural SEO, which poses the question like, let's create something beautiful. That's that scale versus just a bunch of swinging a hammer, making these pages that are spun up like you just described, and doing nothing.
I'm curious because you mentioned programmatic SEO. Do you have a lot of clients that come to you and they're like, we want to do programmatic SEO?
I don't know if it's everyone, but I think you see a lot of people talking about there's like this opportunity in programmatic SEO, and there are these tools that you can use to create pages, and we can get traffic. And it's like I think it goes back to the comment about like architectural SEO versus like, do you deserve to have 10,000 pages about a certain thing? And sometimes the answer is no. And it's like you might get traffic, but it probably wouldn't do anything. Probably wouldn't go on forever. And then the architectural component, which I'll just keep harping on, I guess, would be like, do you have a page for all of the things that you do, services, products, whatever? Yes or no? And they're like, oh, well, you should create that. Do you have a page for the locations that you're operational inside of, describing what you do in that geo area? No. Oh, well, you should consider creating those. And those kind of questions, right? That's like positive, and that's like additive. You do deserve to get traffic, I would say, for those kind of pages.
Yeah, it seems like now more than ever, programmatic SEO has this like allure to it. And I feel like 99% of the startups I talk to, like, there's no use case for programmatic SEO. And they try to invent one. And the result is like something that's just not that helpful. For like the 1% of companies, I do think programmatic SEO can make sense. If you are like a Glassdoor, then like obviously programmatic SEO makes sense.
Yeah, I think a great example of awful programmatic SEO really quickly would be years ago. I worked with as an independent consultant, worked with a national international PC antivirus software company that had decided at some point, 10, 15 years ago, that it would be a good idea to just make a page for every single virus code type or driver type, regardless of whether it was a virus or not, just every driver ever for the Microsoft Windows operating system. Which, like, if you look at the traffic, it was like all irrelevant. Just people trying to find what is this driver, and then you look at like product analytics and it's like demo conversion rate coming in off the nothing is happening. Look at the bounce rates are incredibly high, and it's just like, well, why did we do this? But we got traffic, but it's all irrelevant. So.
Traffic does not equal dollars, as we've said on this podcast a few times. And I have to ask a follow-up now, and I realize we're going way off course here, but I appreciate your patience with me.
I did tell them to delete all of it. They did delete all of it.
Okay.
And they did operationalize like a couple content writers that were specialized to the antivirus software space, and actually earnestly tried to execute like blog content that I think is still doing really well for them. So that was a fun project.
Well, you've answered my question before I asked it. Did they delete it? And I guess as a follow-up to that, like, do you think having like a large amount of content on your site that's maybe not that helpful, or maybe is helpful but not related to your core business, could actually be like a negative or problematic for that like core part of your website where you could actually drive conversions from?
I think it goes back to like, I guess, stuff we've already touched on, which is like, if you're that guy with the oil, water, industrial separation, small business website, he had a lot of pages. Not all of them were, incredible, but they were all helpful. And like the ones that weren't doing crazy numbers were still like a good footnote. And I'm sure someone would want to read that. However, if you're the example of the like 500 AI spun, awful content that is just wrong factually and of terrible quality, You probably don't want that in your corpus, your website's footprint. You want to eliminate that kind of, terrible thing. Get it out.
Well, last question on programmatic SEO. I've seen and heard of a lot of startups lately using the Google indexing API inappropriately to get their programmatic
A lot of people
pages
building tools for that too.
indexed. Yeah, and like some of our customers have said, like, Nate, why don't you build this tool? And I'm like, well, it's you're only supposed to use the indexing API for job postings and events, but it appears to work on pages that are not job postings and events. Like, should we be using the indexing API to get our pages indexed?
It depends, it's I would say, like, if you're having very, very bad indexation issues as a last resort, maybe that's something worth exploring. But I think if it's like a misuse of what it is intended to do, right? Like, that's not great. To violate TOS, terms of service, or whatever like that. But there is the world that's like, well, if it works, it works, and that's what matters at the end of the day. So I think it's just kind of a game time decision. Obviously, you want to make sure whoever you're working with is aware of. You don't want to over explain the minutia of all of that, but I don't know what the risk profile looks like. I guess in some instances, yeah, all of that would remain true, in my opinion. I'm giving you like a legal non-answer.
It's all good because I don't know that anyone knows the answer to that question because I don't think Google has really like commented on it.
I think that's stuff that gets me a little, like, I don't know. I don't get riled up about SEO per se. Well, that's probably not true, actually. I kind of do get riled up some. But like, if you make 500,000 awful programmatic pages and then you use the indexing API to like spam those into the index and then you do get traffic, I don't know. I mean, something about that just really good for you, I guess. Maybe I'm just jealous that I'm not doing it myself and making money, but whatever.
Yeah, we we will have John Mueller on the podcast when he agrees to come on, and we'll ask him this question or ask someone from Google's team about this.
I'll say hi, John, and hope you like my very correct Google approved answer.
Yes, no, I feel like a lot of your answers have been Google approved. Are you like you might be working for Google? We'll figure that out.
I have no ads to sell you, Nate.
Well, I do want to buy your $499 course after this.
Coming soon.
Well, that's great. And we'll definitely put a link to it in the show notes. No, I'm kidding. But before I move on, I want to come back to one other thing you said. You mentioned like CMS platforms really like abstracting away some of those core fundamentals of SEO. You mentioned like WordPress and Webflow and Contentful. I think those were the three examples you provided. Is there a certain CMS that is way more annoying or causes way more issues than another?
It depends, Nate. Yeah, that's the worst podcast ever. You just keep saying it. No, I think that there is no best or worst, right? To me, there is poorly run Webflow and poorly run WordPress and poorly run other Contentful, whatever other headless thing, what CMS you're using. And like, there are bad developers that poorly implement the websites on those platforms. That is true, but like inherently, even Wix now is, I would say, very SEO performant and very solid, as is Shopify. Everything is pretty performative out of the box. You can mess it up, and you can, make it quote unquote awful. I think that becomes more and more evident to me over time. I've seen people doing great numbers and getting great traffic from like a Squarespace website. It is what it is.
I'm going to make you answer this one directly. If you had to build a new website from scratch today, what platform would you choose?
So I was a web developer early on when I was just getting my foothold in the world and had just left my Lego media company. And I used to build in WordPress, and I guess today I still do, run WordPress websites. That is how I like to build. That is what I build in. There is something about being able to write PHP and put it directly into your own server and have it run and just do stuff without having to like set up a third-party API handler to like parse data back in and out. Kind of like how, Shopify Webflow, the paradigms that they sort of exist within.
I am pulling it back to the outline, and I appreciate your patience as we've veered very far from the outline. But this has been a lot of fun. So back to the episode outline. I want to talk about SEO for B2B SaaS companies. And you don't need to name a client specifically, but are there one or two websites in B2B SaaS that you just think are doing an awesome job right now?
I think if I'm going to reference, we have worked with a company called Heap previously, and everything about the content on that site, it's just I would say best in class, and the performance of the site itself is solid. It is just a good example, I think, of a lot of things done right.
I know you worked with JH in the past and currently do, and we had JH on the podcast. He was one of our earliest guests when we first started this podcast about a year ago. And JH and I talked a little bit about like high in the funnel content, like the value or lack of value of it. For example, like on our website, we might publish an article that's what is SEO, for example. How do you feel about like very high in the funnel content, like very boring, like evergreen pieces? Is there a place for it, or it's not that important?
If you have a unique take and you're ready to actually add value with a piece like that, and your expectations out of the gate are that you're not going to be converting people into a demo or into some sort of revenue attributable type thing, but like maybe you have some sort of upstream like micro conversion that you can get people into a community or into a newsletter from a piece of content like that, and it's all like not for naught. It helps you kind of like build your audience. Yeah, go for it, right? Because you're just kind of well, I personally at this point have like multiple different like Google Docs that I have like collected thoughts on like Webflow SEO, and like because I just have got tired of like rewriting the same. People ask me a question, or a friend kind of sends me a message somewhere, ask me about this or that. It's like I just share the doc, but like as a company, you probably want to have like, well, this is how we think about it, and then here, read this, and that's like a great thing to be able to do. And if you're not doing that overtly, and it's people finding it, and they're like, "Oh, I really like what's being said here. I want to hear more." And there's maybe some newsletter that is relevant to who would be reading that. I want to learn about SEO, and Nate's newsletter is going to teach me about that on the positional website, something like that. Yeah, I'll sign up. Sure, sounds good.
And you mentioned tracking conversions, and that sounds like reporting to me, but I know SEO reporting is a little bit broader than just tracking conversions. What is the right approach to reporting? What do you include in like a report to a client that says, the strategy is going well, or maybe the strategy isn't going well?
Yeah, there's like this thing about breaking things down into like units of 3 or 2, or but so when you approach reporting, the breakdowns that I look for that to me make it really sing. It's like breaking down website by section of page, or sorry, page type. So like breaking down blog, breaking down product page, breaking down basically by folder, if you can think of it that way, and then also breaking down keyword traffic by branded versus unbranded, and then trying to paint a picture of performance over time, performance incrementally, month over month, by slicing and dicing in those ways. And then doing that is just kind of gives like that well-rounded view of performance that is not in that overly blended, kind of obfuscated way that it is almost indecipherable, right? The follow-up to that, I would say, is just tracking conversion at the page level, and tracking conversion at the by different events and different types of events, and then ideally, not always possible due to CRM company technology limitations, but what kind of pipeline came in off of what kind of content, and what does that look like?
Yeah, and we're all building SEO channels for conversions and pipeline and revenue. When you first start working with a client, I'm guessing that might not be the initial KPI. You could tell me if I'm wrong, but when does like conversion or revenue become the KPI? Like how long into an engagement?
Certain amount of pieces have to have been stood up at a certain point. Uh, Different technical issues that maybe are really, really hurting things should be taken care of. And then after a certain point, you probably have the ability to go and say, "Oh, look at this demo that came in and signed up for XYZ 12-month deal and looked at these 3 pieces of blog content that were written." Um, you know, like that stuff is incredible to see after a few months of doing work.
Yeah, and is there a certain like conversion tying platform that you've really enjoyed working with? Like I know like HubSpot has like an analytics tool set where they could tie like a blog post into the CRM.
I think HubSpot is I publicly shout from the tops of roofs, I guess, at this point. I need to go get an affiliate account at HubSpot. But I think it's best in class, and I think that I use the product extensively, actually, like in like an SMB, very small business settings, like years and years ago, and I've kind of come back to it recently with these more enterprise type B2B clients, and I think it like represents HubSpot's maturity over time. They've kind of become much more fully featured, much more mature, and their analytics, their reporting, that whole just everything, the way that they have that tool structured, it's just transformative for being able to very easily go in and get some visibility into how marketing is performing, where, what's happening.
By the way, I don't know if you saw, but I think it's rumored that like Google is going to be buying HubSpot.
I don't know what the FTC is doing these days. I can't really keep head or tail of who they're going to let merge with who or who's not. I don't know who's paying off who, but I would be shocked to see it go through, but I also would not be surprised. So,
Yeah, I think it's just speculation at this point, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. If a representative from Google wants to come on the podcast and talk about the HubSpot acquisition there,
we're just shouting out John over and over again over here.
yeah, John, come on the pod. Let's talk about HubSpot. I don't know. But as far as like setting expectations goes with clients, like how do you communicate timelines? How important is that when you're starting an engagement with a new client?
One of the reasons I've really loved working with John Ray these last few years is that we, I guess, both see eye to eye, or he at least gets that component better than anyone. And so working with him, I've never had to deal with that personally, because that's something that he's taken care of. But I think there's a lot of expectation setting that occurs as part of the, you think of a sales process, and it's like, it's not like a adversarial thing at all. It's, like, I'm going to help you do the thing, get to the end state that you want to get to. This is where you're at now. This is what it's going to look like to get there. Let's work together. And I think that with all of those pieces in place, there's a very good understanding of what will need to be done to get to the point that X, Y, and Z thing is humming along, and organic search is this wonderful channel for revenue generation.
Well, Matthew, this has been so much fun. If it's okay with you, I've got a few lightning round questions that I'd love to ask you.
Let's do it.
So you mentioned YouTube SEO very early on in this episode, and I'm curious, is how similar or different is YouTube SEO to regular SEO?
And you're on rented land on YouTube. It's not your site, and so the levers that you can pull are a lot smaller. And so, in my opinion, it kind of takes you back to the fundamentals from the ground floor, right? Which is like, if you're on YouTube, you can optimize what is the title, what is the cover image, what is the video, what is your description. And there's other stuff you can do, of course, but like, just dial in those fundamentals and you will get traffic, or not, because your content sucks, and that's on you. Sorry.
Core web vitals, important, or just we'll worry about those later?
I think you have to view it in a Pareto standpoint, or like that 80-20 sort of lens. Is a website, does it take 5-10 seconds to load, and does it load 25 megabytes of JavaScript? that's probably something to be concerned about. But like, should you spend $10,000 worth of engineering time to get an 84 page score to like a 93? No, I don't think that's prudent.
Are the site audit metrics, I should say the scoring in site audits, are they helpful or they're really just made up?
They're helpful if they're in the right hands with the person that has the correct contextual knowledge to view them through the lens that they should be looked at. But if like Ahrefs site auditor gets into the hands of a C-suite executive that doesn't have any context on what they're looking at, they just think that it should go to 100 immediately. That can very, very misdirect efforts and be very difficult to push back against. So it's kind of like the Yoast green light, blue light score in WordPress. If anyone's familiar with that, like it can be helpful directionally, but like, is it the North Star signal of all is good and holy in the world? No, I don't think so.
Well, that must have come from a personal experience where like some C-suite exec saw a score that they didn't like.
Many years ago, a very early client of mine, and the CEO had a account or had the Ahrefs account in his name, got the emails, and oh boy, that was I don't know, that was no comment.
Well, that actually leads me to my last question. Have you ever had to fire a client? And if so, why?
Personally, yeah, and I guess I've witnessed it done. I think it's if there's just grotesque misalignment between expectations versus reality and what's possible and what's not. I think for me personally, years ago, especially, like the line in the sand was like, if you just don't want to implement or do what we need to do, in my opinion, to do what you want to do, to speak in parable or iambic parameter or whatever, like I think sorry, it's just it's not you, whatever the breakup phrase is. It's not you, it's me. Bye. Good luck. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that's what Google is going to be saying.
That's Google's no. It's not do not be evil or whatever it was. Now it's just it's not you, it's us. Yeah.
It's not your crappy website, it's us.
We want to make some money. Yeah.
Yes, Google's a for-profit business, and I feel like people often forget that. But Matthew, it's been so much fun. Thank you for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
No, just keep on rocking in the free world. Do.
Well, we will try our best. And if I can find a HubSpot affiliate link, I'll try to drop it in there.
Yeah, throw mine in there. I want to.
Yeah. Send me yours.
Yeah.
All right, Matthew. Well, it's been awesome. Talk to you soon.
All right. Cheers.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Optimize podcast. This episode was brought to you by Positional. At Positional, we've got tools for content optimization, keyword research, internal linking, and so much more. We'd love for you to check Positional out at positional.com. And you can always reach out to me too if you have any questions at nate@positional.com.